It started before sunrise at Balmoral, when a small convoy quietly entered the estate grounds under unusual security restrictions. No public announcement was made. No photographers were invited. Yet by midday, whispers were racing through palace corridors that Prince William had just taken a step no one expected, one that reportedly left Queen Camilla completely blindsided. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the reports sounded almost too extraordinary to believe. Balmoral had always been a place wrapped in tradition, a sanctuary where some of the monarchy's most important decisions were made far from public scrutiny. Yet according to palace insiders, something very different unfolded during those early morning hours. Long before most royal staff had begun their day, a select group of trusted advisors reportedly arrived alongside Prince William under a veil of secrecy that immediately raised questions. The atmosphere surrounding the gathering was said to be unusually controlled, with information tightly restricted and communication channels carefully monitored. Even within palace circles, very few people appeared to know exactly what was taking place. What made the situation even more remarkable was the level of silence that followed. Staff members who normally handled routine estate operations were reportedly instructed not to discuss the morning's events. Several insiders later claimed that conversations about the gathering abruptly stopped whenever senior officials entered a room. Such secrecy was highly unusual, especially when it involved a property as significant as Balmoral. For generations, major decisions connected to the estate had carried enormous symbolic weight, and many began wondering whether a historic shift was quietly unfolding behind closed doors. As the hours passed, rumors spread with astonishing speed. Some believed William had simply attended a private meeting concerning future estate planning. Others suspected something far more significant. The fact that only a handful of trusted advisors were reportedly present fueled speculation that preparations had been underway for weeks, perhaps even months. Those closest to the future king were said to have been moving carefully, ensuring that every detail remained hidden until the proper moment arrived. It was the kind of deliberate caution that often signals a decision with far-reaching consequences. Then came the detail that truly set palace corridors buzzing. According to several royal observers, Queen Camilla had received no advance warning regarding the gathering. Whether that claim was entirely accurate remained unclear, but the suggestion alone was enough to ignite a storm of speculation. Why would such an important event allegedly take place without her knowledge? Why was everything conducted so quietly? And perhaps most importantly, why did so many insiders immediately connect the ceremony to Balmoral's future ownership? The questions multiplied with every passing hour. Veteran royal watchers noted that William had increasingly stepped into a leadership role as the monarchy faced a period of uncertainty. His decisions were being examined more closely than ever before, and many believed this latest move reflected a growing determination to shape the institution's future on his own terms. Reports emerging from within royal circles hinted that the ceremony was not merely symbolic. Instead, it may have represented the beginning of a profound shift in authority, one capable of altering long-standing assumptions about who would ultimately guide one of the monarchy's most treasured estates. By evening, the whispers had evolved into something much larger. What began as scattered rumors now carried the weight of a developing royal controversy. Courtiers spoke cautiously. Advisors remained silent. Insiders offered only fragments of information. Yet beneath the uncertainty, one thing seemed increasingly clear. Whatever had occurred at Balmoral that morning was no routine matter. It was part of a much bigger story, one connected to power, legacy, and decisions made years before the first convoy ever crossed the estate gates. But what happened that morning was years in the making, rooted in a battle over one of the monarchy's most treasured estates. For generations, Balmoral was never just another royal residence. It was the heart of royal tradition, a sanctuary where monarchs escaped the pressures of public life. And that is exactly why control of the estate carried far greater significance than anyone outside palace walls realized. Long before the rumors of secret ceremonies and unexpected decisions began circulating, Balmoral occupied a unique place within the story of the monarchy itself. It was more than stone, land, and history. It represented continuity. It symbolized stability during moments of uncertainty. Across decades marked by political change, family upheaval, and public scrutiny, Balmoral remained one of the few places where the royal family could retreat from the demands of the crown and reconnect with the traditions that defined them. That deep connection transformed the estate into something far more valuable than any ordinary property. It became a living piece of royal identity. No member of the modern royal family embodied that connection more deeply than Queen Elizabeth II. Throughout her reign, Balmoral was often described as her refuge, the place where she felt most at peace amid the endless responsibilities of monarchy. Generations of royal memories became woven into the estate's history. Family gatherings, private reflections, and some of the monarchy's most important personal moments unfolded there, creating a bond that stretched beyond politics or protocol. Because of that legacy, many within royal circles viewed Balmoral as a symbol of the values Elizabeth spent her lifetime protecting. Her influence lingered throughout the estate long after any single event had passed, and that influence carried enormous weight whenever questions about the future arose. As the monarchy entered a new era, those questions became increasingly difficult to ignore. The passing of one generation naturally brought attention to the responsibilities of the next. Who would ultimately guide the future of Balmoral? Who would ensure that its traditions survived intact? These were not questions openly discussed in public, yet insiders claimed they quietly shaped conversations taking place behind palace walls. The estate's future stewardship was becoming more than an administrative matter. It was turning into a debate about legacy itself. At the center of that debate stood Prince William. As heir to the throne, his role had expanded dramatically in recent years. With every new responsibility came growing expectations. Supporters viewed him as the guardian of the monarchy's future, someone tasked with preserving the traditions that had defined previous generations. Others wondered how much influence he would ultimately exercise over royal assets, particularly those carrying deep emotional and historical significance. The more William stepped forward, the more attention focused on the decisions he might eventually make. Those discussions were complicated by another reality. Whenever historic institutions enter periods of transition, differing visions inevitably emerge. While public appearances projected unity, whispers suggested that private disagreements occasionally surfaced regarding the long-term management of important royal estates. Some believed tradition should remain untouched. Others reportedly argued that adaptation was necessary for the monarchy to thrive in a changing world. These competing perspectives rarely reached public view, but they created an undercurrent of tension that became increasingly difficult to ignore. What made the situation particularly sensitive was the symbolic importance of Balmoral itself. Any decision connected to the estate carried consequences far beyond property ownership. It touched questions of duty, inheritance, influence, and the future direction of the crown. Every discussion seemed to lead back to the same issue: who would be entrusted with safeguarding one of the monarchy's most cherished institutions? As speculation intensified, insiders began suggesting that conversations surrounding Balmoral had become more serious than many realized. Beneath the surface, concerns were growing, relationships were being tested, loyalties were quietly shifting. And while the public remained focused on the stunning reports emerging from that mysterious morning gathering, a deeper story was unfolding beneath it all, one rooted in years of uncertainty, competing priorities, and carefully guarded ambitions. The ceremony may have shocked royal observers, but it did not emerge from nowhere. It was the latest chapter in a struggle that had been building quietly for years, hidden beneath layers of tradition and discretion. As those tensions quietly grew behind closed doors, so did concerns about who truly held influence over the future of Balmoral. Insiders had long whispered that Balmoral had become part of a much larger struggle unfolding inside the monarchy. As King Charles faced mounting health challenges, Attention increasingly turned toward the people surrounding him and the influence they carried. The uncertainty surrounding the king's health did more than spark public concern. It quietly altered the balance of power inside royal circles. Whenever a monarch faces personal challenges, questions naturally begin to emerge about the future. But according to palace whispers, this period of uncertainty created something far more complicated. It opened the door to competing visions of what the monarchy should become in the years ahead. While official duties continued and public appearances projected stability, conversations behind closed doors reportedly became increasingly focused on succession, stewardship, and long-term authority. At the center of those conversations stood Queen Camilla. As Charles relied more heavily on trusted figures around him, many observers noticed her role within royal operations growing steadily stronger. Supporters viewed her presence as a source of stability during a difficult period. Critics, however, reportedly questioned how much influence she should possess over matters that extended beyond her immediate responsibilities. Those concerns rarely surfaced publicly, but insiders claimed they were becoming harder to ignore as important decisions about the monarchy's future approached. What made the situation particularly sensitive was that influence inside the royal family has never been measured solely by titles. Relationships matter, access matters, trust matters. And according to those familiar with palace dynamics, different factions had quietly begun forming around competing priorities. Some favored preserving existing arrangements. Others believed preparations for the next generation needed to accelerate. The disagreements were rarely direct. Instead, they unfolded through private discussions, strategic alliances, and carefully chosen conversations that seldom reached public ears. As these divisions deepened, Balmoral became increasingly symbolic of the larger battle taking shape. The estate represented more than tradition. It represented continuity. Whoever ultimately guided its future would send a powerful message about the direction of the monarchy itself. That realization intensified concerns about future decision-making. Every discussion surrounding the estate seemed connected to broader questions about leadership, authority, and legacy. What initially appeared to be routine planning was beginning to resemble something far more consequential. Amid this atmosphere of uncertainty, Prince William's role reportedly expanded. The future king had always understood the responsibilities waiting ahead, but insiders claimed he became increasingly involved in conversations concerning long-term royal strategy. As public attention focused on Charles' condition, William was said to be spending more time evaluating how key institutions, properties, and traditions would be protected in the decades to come. To some, his growing involvement was reassuring. To others, it signaled that important changes might arrive sooner than expected. Senior royals reportedly began conducting their own reassessments. Long-standing assumptions about the future were being examined from every angle. Decisions once considered distant suddenly felt urgent. Questions that had remained comfortably theoretical now demanded practical answers. Who would safeguard the monarchy's most treasured assets? Who would preserve traditions that stretched back generations? And perhaps most importantly, who would hold the authority to make those decisions when the time came? Yet, despite the growing stakes, much of the tension remained hidden from public view. Officially, unity prevailed. Publicly, there were few signs of conflict. But according to palace insiders, private disagreements occasionally surfaced beneath the carefully maintained surface. Different priorities, different expectations, different visions of the future. None of them explosive on their own, yet together they created an atmosphere charged with uncertainty. As weeks turned into months, whispers about Balmoral became increasingly difficult to dismiss. The estate was no longer viewed simply as a beloved royal retreat. It had become a focal point in a much larger struggle involving influence, succession, and the future direction of the crown itself. The concerns that once existed only in quiet conversations were beginning to gather momentum, and those paying close attention sensed that something significant was approaching. Then came a development that transformed private concerns into urgent action. While public attention remained focused elsewhere, Prince William was reportedly making preparations that few people knew existed. Every detail appeared carefully calculated, every conversation deliberately private, leading toward a decision that would alter the balance of royal authority. As speculation continued to swirl around Balmoral and the growing tensions surrounding its future, William was said to be operating with extraordinary caution. Unlike the public drama that often dominates royal headlines, this effort reportedly unfolded in near silence. There were no public statements, no carefully staged announcements, and no visible signs that a significant shift was being prepared. Yet behind closed doors, according to royal insiders, a series of conversations had quietly begun that would eventually reshape the entire discussion surrounding Balmoral's future. Those conversations reportedly started with a small circle of trusted advisors. Individuals who had worked alongside William for years were said to have been brought into discussions concerning long-term royal stability. These were not meetings focused on immediate headlines or short-term public relations concerns. Instead, they allegedly centered on a much larger question. How could the monarchy protect its most important traditions while navigating an increasingly uncertain future? The answers were not simple, and insiders claimed that every possibility was examined with meticulous care. As the weeks progressed, reports suggested that confidential meetings became more frequent. Senior advisors, legal experts, and trusted royal figures were said to participate in discussions that remained hidden from the broader palace structure. What made these meetings particularly intriguing was their secrecy. Even individuals accustomed to sensitive royal matters reportedly knew very little about what was being planned. Information was tightly controlled, creating an atmosphere where rumors multiplied but concrete details remained elusive. At the same time, legal and administrative reviews were allegedly taking place behind the scenes. Documents were examined, historical arrangements were revisited, existing structures were analyzed for their long-term effectiveness. While none of this attracted public attention at the time, insiders later suggested that these reviews formed the foundation of a much larger strategy. The goal, according to those whispers, was not merely to respond to current challenges, but to safeguard the institution for decades to come. The deeper William became involved, the clearer his priorities reportedly appeared. Rather than focusing on personalities, he seemed determined to focus on permanence. Balmoral was viewed not simply as an estate, but as a symbol of continuity stretching across generations. Protecting that continuity required difficult decisions, and sources claimed William increasingly believed those decisions could not be delayed indefinitely. The future king was no longer preparing for some distant responsibility. He was actively shaping what that future would look like. Crucially, he was not acting alone. Several key allies were said to support the broader vision taking shape. Though their identities remained largely unknown to the public, their influence reportedly helped strengthen confidence in the plan. Together, they shared concerns about preserving royal traditions, while ensuring the monarchy remained stable during a period of significant transition. Their support gave momentum to discussions that might otherwise have remained purely theoretical. Yet despite the growing significance of these preparations, they remained remarkably well concealed. Wider palace circles reportedly remained unaware of the full scope of what was unfolding. Even experienced observers found themselves piecing together fragments of information without seeing the complete picture. This secrecy was not accidental. Every step appeared designed to prevent unnecessary interference before the process was ready to move forward. Then, gradually, the scattered pieces began forming a coherent plan. Conversations became decisions, reviews became actions, private discussions evolved into preparations for something tangible. According to insiders, what had started as a series of cautious consultations was now moving toward a defining moment. The outlines of a decisive ceremony were beginning to emerge, and those closest to the process understood that once it happened, there would be no turning back. The future of Balmoral, the preservation of tradition, and the question of who would ultimately guide one of the monarchy's most treasured institutions were all converging toward a single moment. Few people knew it was coming. Even fewer understood its full significance. But behind the silence, momentum had become impossible to stop. And when the chosen morning finally arrived, events moved with remarkable speed. Before much of Britain had even woken up, a carefully orchestrated ceremony was already underway. Those present reportedly understood they were witnessing something historic, even if the rest of the world would not learn about it until hours later. After months of private consultations, confidential reviews, and carefully guarded preparations, the moment had finally arrived. According to palace whispers, the gathering at Balmoral was intentionally scheduled during the earliest hours of the day, when attention would be elsewhere, and public scrutiny would be at its lowest. What had existed only as speculation was now becoming reality. Behind the silence, a decision years in the making was reportedly moving toward its final stage. The gathering itself was said to be remarkably selective. Only a small group of trusted officials and advisors were reportedly invited to attend. These were individuals whose loyalty had been tested over years of service and whose discretion was beyond question. Insiders later claimed that every attendee understood the significance of what was unfolding. This was not a routine administrative event. It was a moment tied directly to the future of one of the monarchy's most treasured institutions. What made the ceremony particularly extraordinary was the atmosphere of urgency surrounding it. Despite the months of preparation, events reportedly moved with astonishing precision. Every detail had already been arranged. Every document had allegedly been reviewed. Every procedural step had been carefully planned long before the first participant arrived. There was little room for uncertainty because, according to those familiar with the process, uncertainty was exactly what the organizers hoped to avoid. At the heart of the gathering was the issue that had quietly dominated palace conversations for months: Balmoral's future stewardship. Though official details remained closely guarded, insiders suggested that the ceremony formalized an ownership transition that many had long suspected was under consideration. For supporters of the move, it represented stability. For others, it raised difficult questions about influence, authority, and the direction of the monarchy moving forward. Regardless of perspective, few disputed the significance of the development itself. Security throughout the morning was reportedly exceptional. Access was tightly controlled. Information remained restricted. Even among senior staff, details were shared only on a need-to-know basis. Such precautions only fueled speculation once rumors began to escape beyond the estate grounds. The secrecy that protected the ceremony during its execution now amplified its impact as fragments of information gradually reached royal insiders elsewhere, and those fragments spread quickly. By midday, conversations were unfolding across royal circles. Advisors exchanged calls. Courtiers sought clarification. Longtime observers attempted to separate fact from rumor. Yet the more people learned, the more extraordinary the story appeared. What had begun as a private gathering was rapidly becoming one of the most discussed developments within palace circles. Every new detail seemed to reinforce the belief that something fundamental had changed. The reactions were immediate, though largely concealed from public view. Some reportedly welcomed the move as a necessary step toward long-term stability. Others viewed it as evidence that power within the monarchy was shifting more rapidly than expected. The differing responses reflected the deeper divisions that had quietly developed over recent years. Questions about tradition, stewardship, and future leadership were no longer theoretical debates. They were now attached to a specific event that had already taken place. Perhaps the most startling aspect of the entire episode involved Queen Camilla. According to persistent palace whispers, she was caught completely off guard by the developments. Whether those reports were entirely accurate remained impossible to confirm, but they spread rapidly among insiders. The suggestion that such a consequential event could occur without her prior awareness only intensified the drama surrounding the ceremony. For many observers, that detail transformed the story from a simple administrative transition into something far more politically significant. As the day progressed, speculation gave way to growing certainty that a major turning point had occurred. The ceremony was over. The decisions had been made. The carefully protected process had achieved its objective. Yet the consequences were only beginning to emerge. What happened inside Balmoral that morning would not remain confined to the estate for long. Its impact was already moving outward, touching relationships, alliances, and long-standing assumptions throughout royal circles. The shockwaves reached royal circles almost immediately, and the reaction was impossible to ignore. If palace whispers are to be believed, Queen Camilla never expected the move to happen so quickly. What had once seemed like a distant possibility suddenly became reality, leaving even experienced royal insiders stunned by the speed of events. As news of the Balmoral ceremony began filtering through royal circles, attention quickly shifted from the event itself to the people most affected by it. Among the names repeatedly mentioned in palace conversations, none generated more speculation than Queen Camilla. For months, discussions surrounding Balmoral had largely remained hidden behind layers of discretion and protocol. Yet now that a major decision had reportedly been finalized, many were asking the same question. Who knew it was coming, and who did not? According to various palace whispers, Camilla was among those caught off guard by the timing. While rumors regarding Balmoral's future had circulated for years, few expected matters to move so decisively and so suddenly. That unexpected speed transformed what might have been a routine transition into something far more dramatic. Royal insiders described an atmosphere of surprise, spreading rapidly through palace corridors, as fragments of information continued emerging throughout the day. The uncertainty surrounding exactly what had occurred only intensified the reaction. Behind the scenes, senior aides reportedly found themselves scrambling for answers. Calls were exchanged. Meetings were requested, clarifications were sought. Individuals who normally possessed access to the most sensitive information appeared eager to understand the full implications of what had happened. The challenge was that reliable details remained scarce. Every confirmed fact seemed accompanied by multiple competing interpretations, creating an environment where speculation flourished faster than certainty. As more information surfaced, palace discussions reportedly became increasingly tense. The ceremony was no longer viewed merely as an administrative development involving a historic estate. It had evolved into a symbol of something much larger, a shift in authority, influence, and long-term planning. Those conversations reportedly revealed deep divisions in how different individuals viewed the event. Some interpreted it as a natural step towards securing the monarchy's future. Others viewed it as evidence that significant decisions were being made without broader consultation. Camilla's reaction quickly became a topic of fascination. Yet even here, accounts varied dramatically. Some insiders suggested she was frustrated by the sudden nature of the development. Others claimed she was more surprised by the timing than by the decision itself. A few sources even argued that reports of shock had been exaggerated. The conflicting interpretations only deepened the mystery. In royal affairs, perception often matters as much as reality, and the uncertainty surrounding her response became part of the story itself. Caught in the middle of these competing narratives was King Charles. According to palace observers, the situation reportedly placed him in an especially difficult position. On one side stood those advocating for continuity, long-term planning, and preparations for the future. On the other stood concerns about influence, consultation, and the pace of change. Navigating those competing pressures was never going to be easy, particularly during a period already marked by significant personal and institutional challenges. Meanwhile, reactions across royal factions varied considerably. Supporters of William's growing leadership reportedly viewed the development as evidence of decisive action during uncertain times. Others remained cautious, questioning what broader changes might follow. The differing responses reflected deeper anxieties about the monarchy's future direction. Balmoral had become more than an estate. It had become a symbol of who would shape the next chapter of royal history. As conversations intensified, a new question began emerging above all others. If such a significant decision could happen with so little warning, what might come next? The issue was no longer simply about ownership. It was about influence. It was about authority. It was about understanding where power truly resided as the monarchy prepared for an increasingly uncertain future. The ceremony had answered one question, but in doing so, it created many more. Yet the biggest consequences were never about one person's reaction. They were about what this meant for the monarchy itself. The reported transfer was about far more than property. To many observers, it represented a declaration of intent from the future king, a sign that the next chapter of the monarchy may already be quietly unfolding. As the immediate shock surrounding the Balmoral decision began to settle, attention gradually shifted toward a larger and more consequential question. What did this moment reveal about Prince William himself? For years, he had been viewed as the monarchy's future. But according to many royal observers, the events surrounding Balmoral suggested something different. The future was no longer a distant concept waiting on the horizon. It was beginning to take shape in real time. The significance of the reported transfer extended beyond legal arrangements or estate management. It was widely interpreted as a statement about leadership. Throughout the uncertainty, William had reportedly demonstrated patience, discipline, and a willingness to think beyond immediate headlines. Those qualities had earned him growing support among individuals who believed the monarchy needed careful stewardship during a period of historic transition. While critics and supporters might disagree about specific decisions, few could ignore the mess that seemed to emerge from the entire process. The future king was becoming increasingly comfortable exercising influence over matters of lasting importance. That perception fueled a broader sense that a symbolic shift was underway. For decades, the monarchy had been defined by one generation's leadership and vision. Now, many believed another generation was gradually stepping forward. The transition was not dramatic or publicly declared. Instead, it unfolded through decisions, responsibilities, and moments that quietly altered expectations. Balmoral became one of those moments. What had once been viewed as a question for tomorrow suddenly felt connected to the realities of today. Among William's supporters, confidence reportedly continued to grow. They viewed the development as evidence that long-term planning was being taken seriously. Rather than reacting to events as they emerged, they believed the future king was preparing for challenges before they arrived. In their eyes, Balmoral was not merely being preserved. It was being positioned as part of a larger vision for the monarchy's future, a vision rooted in continuity, stability, and preservation of tradition. That vision appeared increasingly important as royal priorities evolved. The institution faced pressures unlike those encountered by previous generations. Public expectations were changing. Media scrutiny remained relentless. Every decision carried consequences far beyond palace walls. Against that backdrop, many observers argued that safeguarding historic symbols such as Balmoral had become essential to preserving public trust. The estate was no longer viewed simply through the lens of ownership. It represented continuity between the monarchy's past and its future. At the same time, public perception seemed to be shifting. Reports surrounding the ceremony introduced new conversations about William's role within the royal family. Discussions that once focused exclusively on future succession increasingly examined his present influence. The distinction mattered. It suggested that many people no longer saw him merely as an heir preparing for eventual responsibility. They were beginning to view him as an active participant in shaping the institution's direction today. Yet every answer appeared to create new questions. If Balmoral represented a glimpse of William's future approach, what other changes might follow? How would responsibility continue to evolve within the royal family? What role would other senior figures play as the monarchy entered its next chapter? And perhaps most importantly, how would these developments affect the delicate balance of influence that had existed for so long behind palace walls? Those questions lingered because succession is never solely about titles. It is about authority, trust, and the gradual transfer of responsibility from one generation to the next. Balmoral had become a symbol of that process. The reported transfer was not merely an ending. It was a beginning, a sign that the monarchy's next era might already be taking shape, one carefully considered decision at a time. And as the dust slowly settled, one final question remained unanswered. In royal history, the most significant battles are rarely fought in public. They unfold through decisions, documents, traditions, and moments that quietly reshape the future. And according to palace whispers, this may have been one of those moments. As the conversation surrounding Balmoral gradually moved beyond the initial shock and speculation, a broader reality began to emerge. The reported transfer was never simply about a historic estate. It was about what that estate represented. Throughout the monarchy's long history, certain places have carried meaning far beyond their physical boundaries. They become symbols of continuity, responsibility, and duty. Balmoral has long occupied that position. And because of that, every decision connected to its future carries consequences that extend far beyond the present moment. For Prince William, the reported stewardship of Balmoral may ultimately become one of the defining symbols of his transition toward future leadership. Supporters argue that it reflects a commitment to preserving traditions that have guided the monarchy for generations. Critics may view it differently. Yet, regardless of perspective, few can deny that the estate now stands at the center of a larger conversation about the future direction of the crown. The decisions made today will influence how future generations understand both the monarchy and the responsibilities that come with it. At the same time, the story has also highlighted the tensions that continue to exist within royal circles. While public appearances often emphasize unity, palace insiders suggest that differing opinions remain. Some believe change must come carefully and deliberately. Others argue that the institution must evolve to meet new challenges. These disagreements are unlikely to disappear overnight. In many ways, the Balmoral story has simply revealed questions that were already present beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. King Charles remains at the center of this evolving landscape. Throughout his reign, he has faced the difficult task of balancing tradition with transition. That challenge has only grown more complicated as responsibilities increasingly shift toward the next generation. According to observers, his role now appears to be changing alongside the monarchy itself. Rather than focus solely on immediate concerns, attention is increasingly turning toward the legacy he will leave behind and the foundation he will help establish for those who follow. For Queen Camilla, the future remains the subject of intense speculation. The reports surrounding Balmoral have raised questions that remain unanswered. What influence will she continue to hold as the monarchy evolves? How will future decisions shape her position within the institution? No clear answers have emerged. Yet the uncertainty itself speaks volumes about the changing dynamics that now define royal life. What once seemed secure can suddenly become uncertain, and what once seemed distant can quickly become reality. Despite all the rumors, disagreements, and shifting alliances, one theme continues to rise above everything else: legacy. It is the force that drives so many royal decisions. It shapes priorities. It influences relationships. It determines how history will remember those entrusted with preserving one of the world's most enduring institutions. Balmoral represents that legacy in its purest form. It connects generations, linking the past to the future through a shared commitment to continuity. And yet, even after all the speculation, one question continues to linger: what comes next? If the reported transfer truly signals the beginning of a new chapter, then what other changes might be waiting just beyond the horizon? Will this moment be remembered as an isolated decision, or as the first sign of a much larger transformation within the House of Windsor? Only time will provide those answers. For now, the story remains unfinished. The debates continue, the alliances evolve, the future remains unwritten. But one thing appears increasingly clear: the significance of Balmoral extends far beyond ownership, influence, or authority. It represents the enduring struggle between preserving the past and preparing for the future, a struggle that has shaped every generation of the monarchy and will almost certainly shape those still to come. Because in the House of Windsor, Ownership may change overnight, but the struggle for legacy never truly ends. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.